Hello, and welcome to Right to Be Wrong, the show that revives the art of conversation, accommodating varied views on sports, culture, politics, world events, and every topic under the sun. After all, you have a right to be wrong. Here are your hosts, Dave and Tony.
Tone, it's that time of the week. We're back again. Sit back, relax, open up your mind, and to quote the Will Ferrell movie, Blades of Glory, let me put my opinions in you.
I love it, Dave. I'm here to relax. I thought you were going to say sit back, relax, spread your legs, lube yourself up.
I could do that too.
Yeah.
But I'd get very distracted.
And there'd be lots of hair.
Well, it'd be like two Sasquatches.
Chewbacca.
Yeah, Chewie and the Sasquatch, the Yeti. That's not a very good mental image for people. You know, we've just caused a whole bunch of people alive on the psychologist couches for years.
That's right. Absolutely.
That
Absolutely.
Anyway,
Dave, it's been a good week. Sadly, today I went to a funeral. It always sharpens the focus on life and the inevitability of, especially as we get a bit older, Dave, and you start thinking we're closer to the end than we are to the start.
Well, we did a whole episode, and are you living or existing for that reason?
Wonderful ceremony, but beautiful service. Great. It was good to be there to support my colleague as well as the family. But again, reinforced, as I said earlier, we are closer to the end than the start. And then you think to yourself, well, what legacy are we going to leave, right? Is my eulogy going to be delivered by you, and it's going to be referencing as many Will Ferrell quotes as you can?
Without doubt. I'm a good Googleizer. You didn't think I knew what a Googly was. I think everyone should be watching Zoolander.
I know, but other than that, it's been a good week, Dave. I look forward to being educated, being lectured, being informed, and news for all our listeners out there. The partnership contract that Dave and I signed when we did the Right to Be Wrong podcast now guarantees me at least 25% speaking time on every podcast episode. The clock is on, Mr. Lodge.
Well, I'm actually going to have to go back through that. Was I that generous?
25%.
Am I going to allow you to talk for 25%?
Because over 30 years of knowing you, if I've got 10% of words in, I reckon I'd be doing all right.
I think you're probably batting at about 5.
Sitting in the chair getting a haircut.
It's actually funny. I listen back to the podcast because quality control. And I've always known I talk a lot. But I think it's one of those things I'm starting to realize how much useless shit I know. It's incredible.
Oh, no, it just bounces off me and I absorb it. And then what I do, Dave, I pick up the useless bits of shit that you know, package them in some corporate speak and drop them in at the opportune time at work.
And everyone's like, Tony's a genius.
No.
That's unbelievable.
Mind you, floating the Greek drachma didn't go down too well the other day.
Well, it's too late. We're past that.
I know, about 15 years past.
Yeah, that was a 15-year ago suggestion, floating the drachma.
Mind you, someone did say that there's an inevitability around, or not inevitability, there's a chance for the US, the arse falls out of US bonds, right? People just move out of the US currency, and then the US dollar would devalue significantly. And then it'd be the same type of scenario. How do they get themselves out of that?
Well, without going too far off what we're going to discuss tonight, one thing I think there's an episode for us to do in the future will actually be around de-dollarization, and that the US, for mine, needs to renew the petrodollar contract with the House of Saud. But
I love when you use big words. Can you promise me you can use the word centrifugal tonight?
I'll use the word centrifugal.
And will there at some stage be a pivot?
No, see, you're the corporate speak guy. I'm more just the big words because I eat alphabet soup and then try to pretend that I'm an intellectual.
Okay. That's a great way to segue into, Dave, democracy for the majority or the minority? Interesting question. That's what we're going to tackle tonight. Now, I couldn't help myself, and I went to look up.
Help myself.
Yeah, I went to look up a classic Greek definition of democracy. From the Greek words demos and kratos, this system, exemplified in classical Athens, involved direct citizen participation in government, where eligible citizens directly made decisions and managed state affairs, though eligibility was restricted to free adult men back in the day. But, Dave, power to the people. So how do we tackle a question when we say, is democracy for the majority or the minority? I look at that and I think, well, democracy is for all of us, isn't it?
It is.
But I think the issue is, and I want to explore this with you, where self-interest has played its part people's definition and people's processes around how they attempt to implement democracy might have gone a bit off course.
Well, I'll start with, I think you're already at your 25%. So no.
Can we get a count on that, please, Mr. Producer?
No more words. Tom, cut his mic. So we'll start with, it's very obvious that your question isn't democracy for everyone in a democratic system. And the short answer is yes, of course. The reality answer is, since when do you make decisions that every single person is happy at once, right? It doesn't happen.
That's right.
So the reality is, democracy, there are two things that it relates to as the majority. The first is the process we use for voting in the government of the day under a democratic process is the majority.
Yep.
So that's first and foremost, and makes sense. Now, that doesn't mean that you forget those that didn't vote for you. You should be attempting to govern for everyone, the best interest of everyone. But the reality is that won't happen. So you're then governing for the majority. Now, by governing for the majority too, what you should also be doing is attempting to govern for what the majority of people voted for based on what you took forward to that election. Now, this is something, ironically, I've been thinking about for 2 or 3 weeks, because you said something to me in an episode about the information I get and the results that we see at, say, a federal election here in Australia, where I said majority of people are struggling, majority of people don't want what Albo and Labor's putting forward, but you said 94 seats. And I've been thinking about this because I do, putting my serious hat on, I've got my McLaren hat, but my serious hat as well. I do actually listen. That's how I've learned so much. So I think carefully about what's the disconnect. And I came to the conclusion, actually, there's not a disconnect. It's that, well, there is, but it's not a disconnect in that the people that are saying these things, there must be people that absolutely love our government because that's why they've got 94 seats. The disconnect is actually that people are misinterpreting the 94 seats as a mandate. Now, what I mean by that is if you won 94 seats because you won 51% of the vote, I would call that a mandate. That means what you went to the election with, what you had produced in the years prior, as this was a return of an existing government, I would call that a mandate. And that would mean to me, if you went to the polls saying, we're all white supremacists and we want to replicate the Third Reich, we're going for a Fourth Reich, and 55% of people in a primary vote want that, and that resulted in 100 seats out of 150, I'd say that's a mandate. I think when you primary vote, and again, this is not me attacking the government we have because it's the same both ways. So had the coalition have had 1 or 2% swing to them and they were in this position, I'd say the same thing. I think the difference is that at best, 6.5% of people, 6.5 out of every 10% of people, 65% of voting age didn't give the first preference to this government. And it's about 6.4 out of every 10 for the coalition, so it was worse. I think that what happens in that situation is if in a two-party preferred system, you get the outcome we did, and you think you've got a mandate, that's where I think you've got it wrong. Because if everyone really believed in the policies you put forward, you wouldn't have such low primary vote. So that's what's sort of got me thinking about this. Well, we've got to a point where what we are doing is we are running a democracy for the minority. And this has played out in Western society for the last 10 or 15 years. And some of the minority, I mean, is not just the minority vote. It might be within our country, we have 3% of people that are impacted by X problem, 5.7 impacted by Y problem, and 1.3 impacted by Z problem. Now, a healthy democracy will still ensure that you're trying to take people forward that fall in those minorities. So it might be a disability minority, it might be a cultural race minority, and it might be some other type of minority, right? So you don't say, well, we're the majority, screw you, in a healthy democracy. However, you don't say, well, we have these minorities and they're quite vociferous, or I think that they're the preeminent reason why I do things, and then your entire legislation is throwing out the will of the majority to cater to that minority. So that's where, for me, I think this question arises.
But Dave, democracy's bound in participation. Everyone gets a voice. That's why I say it's for all.
It's
Now,
definitely for all.
You mightn't like the outcome, right? The right or the left or the middle or the Greens or whoever, but everyone gets a vote. Everyone gets to participate in this process by which we elect governments. Now, if you're not getting enough of the primary vote, right, and we've got this two-party preferred system, so every vote counts in theory, right? If the outcome is the outcome and you don't like it, I still think democracy is for all, because the process by which you get to go to the school, get your democracy sausage, go up there and vote, that's what I treasure, right?
But democracy is more than just the process of your vote, because democracy can't be on a 12-hour period every 3 years on a federal cycle. That's when and this is what I mean. That's not when democracy kicks in. That's part of the process of democracy. To me, what it means is whether you're trying to make America great again, or whether you're trying to fix Australia and take it forward, Tony, it doesn't matter who you are as a leader. You've now won. You realise that you still should be governing in the best interests of everyone, not just who you think's a Republican.
I agree, and I think
now within reason.
Yeah, but I think some leaders across the world do that better than others. Some societies do that better than others. Some leaders choose to be quite polarizing and confrontational once they get in and start going after their opponents. John Bolton. And that happens. But I take your point. They have to govern for everyone, and they should be – this is where I get confused, because based on your earlier or your first comments, the Labor government got 35% of the primary vote, right? So they can't say they got a mandate. I kind of agree with that. Maybe I don't know. I have to process that. But you're saying anything they took to the election, they actually don't have real confidence or a mandate to actually go forward with that, because only 35% of people voted for it.
Let me clarify. I think that they still have a right to implement what they took forward to the election.
Yeah.
Right. I don't think you need a mandate for that. So let me clarify. I think the policy platforms you lay out and you run on in an election cycle, and you win even with 10% of the primary vote, right?
Fine.
And you get through, you have a right to implement what you ran on. You put those policies forward on the basis you articulate them clearly. You didn't lie. You laid out what it means and enough information. I think you have the right to go forward and do that. Even if that means those policies will impact 10% of the population and there's 90 that'll miss out. You laid them out. You won. Go for it. To me, when I hear mandate, that means there's a whole bunch of stuff that you go over and above what you laid out,
Sure.
or things you didn't even speak to.
Sure.
So in that situation, because I've railed against the fact that states in Australia are trying to backdoor the voice. So let's use that as an obvious one. If, for example, this government had won 51% of the primary vote and still, let's call it just 3 more seats at 97, and even though we'd had a referendum that had been overwhelmingly rejected, I would still say you're still getting into territory where you can start to do things that have been rejected, because at the end of the day, you've won so comfortably in so many seats that clearly, and the primary vote links with that, it's not just two-party preferred, I've got all these seats. The primary vote reflects that. The population understood what you ran on. They understood what you've done or attempted to do in the last 3 years, and they've given you a larger vote or a big enough vote. Different. To me, a mandate kind of implies that, you know what, we just took 75% of the vote. So some of the stuff we didn't even run on this election, but people know is in our manifesto. People know they're our policy principles. These are foundational to being a Democrat, a Republican, Labor, Liberal. I still believe a mandate then allows you to go on and implement those you didn't even run on. So that's the delineation.
But I don't think you can, Dave. Not in Australia. Not in Australia. I don't think, like, we're pretty good, Dave, and the media, like, it'd be the ultimate point-scoring exercise for them to line up and shoot any government that didn't take a significant policy to the previous election and then try and implement it. It'd be like Albo now saying, yeah, just got elected for another 3 years. Thanks for that. I've got 94 out of 150. Thanks for that. How does a 17.5% GST tickle your fancy?
Well, it all depends. If for example, that's come out of the blue,
yep.
Then again, I think, because this gets to where I talk about social contract. There's a social contract, which means very large things, not tinkering around the periphery and legislation that most people don't care about, don't know about. It's not going to be huge. Anything is going to be massive. I think there's a social contract to put that on the table. And by put it on the table, again, I know you can't speak to your 17 policies each election because that's information overload for people. But what I mean is, if you said, well, actually, if you look at let's use Albo in that situation. Albo says, if you look at our policy platform and you look at all the things we've been writing since 2018, well, we've said we believe the country needs a larger GST because then we can cut income tax, we could do this. We then mention it again. That's enough for me, right?
Yeah, I agree.
Because at the end of the day, it's not up to politicians to go and handhold you every single time.
No, I agree. But they've been silent on a lot of that stuff, right? So even me, I would go, I think they're asking for trouble politically if they were to go with major tax reform that they hadn't taken to an election, right? For some of that big stuff, you just need to take to election and say, we're coming. So they're softening us up now, right? Productivity roundtable, get business people involved, get all the feedback, productivity commissioner. They're softening us up. There's going to be tax reform, which I think is actually the right thing to do. And if they did have a mandate of 45% like Hawke and Keating and Howard had, and this is where I think the courage of our current day politicians is lacking, potentially because they don't have that big primary vote, but they've got all this power, but they don't use it, Dave. They're too scared to use it, right? Like Keating once said, if you've got the power, the political capital, you've got to burn it up.
I agree 100%.
Right? And then I think our politicians don't, right? So I actually think that mandate is something that I think psychologically people link to the 94, right? But mandate would be, for me, broad consensus across those who voted for you and a portion, potentially significant portion of those who didn't vote for you, that policy is a good policy.
I agree. And
right.
I think that's the starting basis of that is going back to those previous leaders we've had. The starting base for that is because you've already got 45 to 49% of the primary vote. It's not within it's not outside the realms of reason to think that any policy that you might throw out there, that even though the opposition people that didn't vote for you, there'd still be 10% that on that particular policy go, no, I like that. So using that basis, if you already picked up 46, 47 of the primary vote, and there's 10% that go, that particular policy I'm on, that's why that's more of a mandate. I think that's why we didn't get the type of pushback we get on the implementation of some policies, because it didn't matter whether it was Liberal, Labor, Democrat, Republican, Tory, Labor, because you're winning elections at such a high percentage of the primary vote, most policies, that meant you normally had sort of 50 to 60% of people to agree with most policies, which meant you're governing from the majority.
Yeah, I get it. Now, what about there's some historical examples where majorities have led to some pretty bad outcomes, and this is where we say, is democracy for the majority or the minority? Let's kind of stare into some of this stuff. Segregation in the US, so laws passed by the majority that specifically targeted a minority, and there's no way out for the minority.
Let's bring it back. I know I need someone to mow my lawns for $2. No, it's and this is something that people forget in democracies. Just because you're a democracy doesn't mean your policies are right. We've seen, at the end of the day, the Weimar Republic voted in the Nazis, and then of course they got rid of their opposition. But this is something that's hard to accept for people. But in a healthy democracy, with some rare exceptions of if you're seeing the rise of the Fourth Reich, or you're seeing Klansmen on every corner, this is where you've got to accept and trust in, and this gets back to other episodes we've done on trust in institutions. You need to trust that the majority of what's going on at the moment, you don't like it, and people will vote them out at the next election. That's part of the checks and balances. But what we're seeing, the disillusionment around the democratic nations of the world, is that we're getting politicians that are openly, they're not stupid. There are some, but for the most part, they're not stupid. They know what their populations want, and they're deliberately going against it. So Keir Starmer, for example, in the UK at the moment, knows that everyone wants illegal migration to stop, and stop now. And he just refuses to do it. Now, he doesn't stand there and outrightly say, no, this is what I want. He talks the game, but then doesn't do anything. So the problem we have is we have a lot of leaders at the moment that they know what they're doing is not popular by any stretch of the imagination, but because it's their particular worldview, it's I think they're ideologically possessed, because it's those that think open borders and everyone can come to a country. But it's that sort of thing that I have a real issue when I say, well, is the democracy being run for the majority or the minority?
I'm hearing you, Dave. Interesting. Dave, so what about...
How far into your 25% are you?
About 12. Right. So talk about checks and balances. So there are different parts of government or parts of society that democracies have built to kind of protect the minorities, yeah? So the independent bench.
That's a really good way to say it. Geez, I wish I'd said that.
So they've done that.
That's probably one of the best and smartest little things you've said there. Say it again.
No, because that will eat into my 25%.
I just took another 2% off you.
So democracies have implemented this independent bench where people, through the rule of law, can take their case to an independent judiciary and get a ruling on it. And as we've said in the past, that's what the Supreme Court is in the US, basically ruling on the Constitution. So you can actually do that, which is great. And also we've got, now I actually think, I don't think this works as well, and maybe it's just because of the nature of the people in it, but these parliamentary setups, the Westminster style of an upper house and a lower house, and the upper house being the Senate being selected or being elected on proportional representation, and being like a check and balance for the lower house to kind of keep them in order. It sounds good, right? But I reckon there's a whole lot of costs there we could probably get rid of, Dave.
Well, if you actually, the Westminster system was set up that way because they're actually called, you know what the lower house is called?
The House of Commons.
What's the upper house called?
House of Lords. Yeah.
That's why it was set up.
Yeah, but still...
It was originally set up to say... Okay, peasants. We'll allow you to argue and to have a vote and have a say, but anything that we don't like, we'll make sure that we can really absolutely ensure that it will not take place. It sounds very Henry Blofeld then, wasn't it?
That's right, but as...
And Ponting, he's guided that down the third man, and there's no run there. Do you remember Henry Blofeld?
I do.
The commentators back in the day, the old Tony Coziers, Richie Benos, Henry Blofeld, it's all a good ones.
The Indian guy?
Tony Cozier.
No, he was West Indian.
Oh, sorry.
You know what I'm talking about. The guy who used to just wet himself every time Kerry O'Keefe cracked a joke.
Harsha Boglo.
Yeah.
They're a good pair.
It's a knick-knack, paddywhack, give
the frog alone. He's old man's a rolling stone. Kerry's best joke. Though.
So if you touch back on the Senate and the House of Lords, call it what you like, or as Paul Keating called them, and I love it, unrepresentative swill. That is like another check and balance in the process, but I haven't seen it. I just don't see it as effective in today's environment for some reason. I'll have to better understand how we get so many Greens, because it's based on the number of first preference votes you get in the lower house, and that drives your Senate numbers. So I kind of get it. It's there for checks and balances, and it forces the government, even with 94 seats in the lower house, the government has to side up with either the coalition, the Greens, or the Greens and the Independents, or a mishmash of all those three to get bills through, right?
Which can be good and bad.
That's right, because there's some stuff that's common sense that kind of gets locked up, and it gets locked up because it's political to do so, as opposed to passing common sense policy and bills through that are going to improve outcomes for everyone, right?
You know why I think my one main thing that I think why we're being driven into this minority policy around the world. The reason why I think we're seeing the bifurcation, and I'm not saying that back in the day, everyone agreed on politics and we all sat around the fire and sang Kumbaya. That's not what I mean, right? What I mean is we used to say we knew where the nation was going and we'd have the debate on how you would get there, right? So we agreed on the destination, we debated the journey. I think what we're seeing now is around Western society where we're nearly back in the 1920s, 1930s era where we're a clash of ideologies.
Yeah.
Because the rise again of socialism and communism and how that's butting up against free market capitalism, I think that's what's happening because the modern, what we call woke, is the modern incarnation of Marxist ideology. So the postmodernists in the 70s, people like the French philosophers Derrida and Foucault, they saw particularly as things like Alexander Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago got snuck out of Russia and people started to see the truth of Soviet life rather than it was this amazing system that was outdoing free market capitalism. They saw that people's appetite to be communist, socialist/communist had really started to decline. So they needed a new way to sell the same idea. So what they did is the concept of Marx is really just the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, right? So the oppressors and the oppressed. So they rebadged that in postmodernist ideology, and that's when you start to get minorities are all oppressed and all white people oppress them.
Yeah.
Businesses are all rich and they're oppressing their workers, right? So if you look through the through line, so that's what we've got to. So how we've got woke, and then woke, and this is where the left, the modern far left has been very good. They use great language, right? So DEI, we make fun, or I make fun of it. DEI on its face value say diversity, equity, inclusivity, and the average person goes, "Oh yeah, of course," right? So they've come up with great names for things that you think, why wouldn't I? But it's the rebadged Marxism. So because we have that, their vision is to run things for minorities, with some exception that you wouldn't call women as a group minority, but they talk about what they call BIPOC, black and Indigenous people of colour. And then they'll have all these ideas that because of this oppression, these minorities, we need legislation to give them a leg up. In some ways, there's been truth in the past, but I think that's why now we have this situation where what we're seeing is no one party can really take hold because we've got a clash of ideas going on. And a lot of people are on one side because they don't understand what that means, and a lot of people on the other side are taking it to the hyper and not understanding the damage that that's doing.
Yeah, I get that, but in Australia, it still really is on the fringes, Dave.
It's not as fringe as what you think. It's not as big as the US. It's not mainstream.
I'll be honest, you're tarnished, right? And you're scarred, and you're probably going to need some counselling at some point by all the time you spend at uni.
Oh, without doubt.
Right.
But I do see a bit more of it than just at uni because
I know, but I think
because I see like our whole TAFE system, our whole school. I'll probably say our education system is probably where it's.
Let
me
reframe it. What were the female US representatives called? They come up with a name for themselves. AOC.
Oh, the squad.
The squad, right? I don't really see anything that even gets close to that in Australia. Maybe some of the Greens, because they don't have the profile, and they know that they're going to get shut down pretty quick because we're more common sense here, right? Across both sides. We're not going to put up with that crap. So I get it. But I take your point. Can we move on, Dave? I want to touch on something around the different styles of elections and how elections are run and ultimately form government. So the UK's got their first past the post, right? Yep. So that can overrepresent the majority and underrepresent minorities potentially. Proportional representation in Australia, right, in the Senate, right? So the PR, the proportional representation gives minorities and small parties a stronger voice. But does proportional representation make democracy more representative or less stable?
I think the answer is yes.
It makes it...
Yes, because it can do both.
Both, yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, it can do both depending on the time. It can have some upside. It can have some downside. I think, again, for me, part of why we're getting to this is that lack of civics, that the shift in society of asking that question: is this legal? Are we compliant?
Is
right?
Is this right?
Not instead of is this right? Because I think some of the things we're seeing here, the same thing would happen. Because let's imagine any election you want, whatever country you're listening, hopefully all democratic. But let's imagine the person that you didn't vote for comes out in the night after the concession speech has been given by your candidate, and the victory speech, and they're not platitudes. They literally say, I am here to govern for all. There's going to be times you're not going to get what you want, but please do not think that I'm trying to make that the case. There'll be times what I'm trying to do is ensure the nation is safe, secure, with law and order, a strong economy, and opportunities for all. I'm not here to govern for those that vote for me. I'm here as a leader to take our nation forward. Now imagine that being said, and when you hear it, it's not because it's your side and like a seal. You're actually on the other side. You're on the losing side, and you actually listen and see the eyes of the person saying it, and you truly believe they're going to do it. Well, for you, you're not going to get as wound up in politics if you lose, because you might think, you know what? I really want university to be free. You know, this government, they're not about that, but my life is good. Right, but what we've now got is people feel like when they lose an election, we've lost a war, and life is catastrophic, and often it's telling yourself more than what it is. But again, to me, the responsibility here is on these people that put themselves forward to be politicians, and I think it's time that they start to look in the mirror and ask what role are they playing in the bifurcation of society, where, using the US, on average, the Democrats hate the Republicans hate the Democrats. Why have you done that to your country?
That's right.
They're all one. Why weren't you governing for all? But again, the problem I think we have is because, Trump represents free market capitalism. He represents something that's very different from what the far left wants.
I do laugh at that.
At free market capitalism.
Trump represents free market capitalism only until the US government takes a 10% stake in a US software company.
Oh, there's always going to be that. But you know what I mean? What I mean is the
don't just wash it
representation.
off. Come on, mate.
No, but it's not washing it off, because it's like that's an in-depth conversation. It's going to be a whole episode.
Yeah, I know what I'm saying.
But what I mean is that he doesn't represent socialism, right?
Yeah, I get it.
He doesn't want socialism.
Yeah.
He doesn't want quotas of people that get jobs based on their color, their sexual identity, so on and so forth, right? He represents what we used to be. Right? And there's plenty of criticisms I can make. I'm not saying he's the Messiah. On the other side of the coin, and even the Democrats by their own numbers are saying we've nearly got to cut off this limb that's starting to become gangrene, because we've got this rise of socialism again, and it just doesn't fly with the modern, the average Democrat, let alone Republican.
I get it. So UK, Australia. So the US, this is an interesting one. So you get a minority of voters in swing states who can actually decide the presidency because of the electoral college votes. And then every state in the US gets 2 senators.
Yeah, which is a strange one given the population disparity.
So California's got 40 million people. Wyoming's got 600,000 people.
Yeah. That's very strange.
But it does,
because it doesn't happen in the for the electoral college.
Oh no, but it does provide the minority a voice.
It does. And that's why this system is set up in such a way. Look, it's not a bad system. There are going to be times, one of the things that we get wrong is we think that everything all the time's got to be perfect. When you look at the history of the US since independence into this period and say, well, has the democratic process worked overall? What, you've had no issues for the most part. It's only been the last few years. And both sides have been responsible for that. So it's, it's something that I think we will get. We're slowly moving back towards sanity in some ways as people start to realize you can't always, every election can't have something in it for you. There's got to be times that the common good needs to be looked after.
No, but when you see and you look up, Dave, and you see so many politicians that are clearly self-interested in everything they do, it's hard to tell the bloke with 3 kids living in the burbs trying to get by, listen, just because you don't get anything, you should still vote a certain way, right?
Oh, no, I agree.
It is hard.
I agree totally. Yeah. But for me, the thing I like most about our Australian system over the US system is the money. Now, I'm not saying there's not money in our politics, but you don't need to get $1.5 billion to run a prime ministerial campaign to get elected.
Yeah.
So that skews things badly.
And we'd be more than happy to put some of our volumes of cash here at Right to Be Wrong behind any political party.
Yep. If anyone's out there that needs $1.50 for a slushie.
Clive Palmer, are you out there?
Yeah, we'll give you slushie money.
There's something else.
Because that's what it's called, isn't it? A slushie fund?
I think so. Yeah. I think so.
Pretty sure.
Slush fund. Another thing that I liked about the Australian approach in referendums is it requires a double majority.
Yes.
So
majority of votes in majority of the states.
Yeah. So it's another check and balance in place. But Dave, I'll throw some comments out, all right? And then let's have a chat about
25%.
No, let's have a chat. So legitimacy rests on majority consent, full stop. Without majority rule, governance stalls. You can't run a country on vetoes from every minority interest.
Correct.
That last one. You can't run a country on vetoes of every minority interest.
One of the things that...
Yeah, and sorry, the context of that is everyone feels like now they've got a voice and they need to be heard.
And I agree with that. And that's what happens once every 3 years or 4 years if it's at the state level.
So let me expand.
I know what you're talking about. What you're talking about is we want to put a bridge from there to there, and you've got 2 people on one side of it that the red striped 3-legged transgender tree frog, it's going to impact them. So we'll hold this up for the next 10 years.
Yeah, but I'm also speaking generationally, Dave. Increasingly, people want to be heard all the time. I've got a voice.
Yeah, well, right? This is a whole episode I've got on our list, which is going to be, stop telling people they're special. Because that's what comes about. Everyone's like, you're so special and everything you say matters and you have a voice. And if you want that, start a podcast.
Do you think that'll be part of our nation building series?
It will be part of our nation building series.
So, Dave, you can't run a country on vetoes from every minority interest. You can't. You get your chance to speak. You get your chance to put your vote in, right? And then it's up to the government of the day to implement the policies that they went with and not overstretch too far. But the moment you continually try to please minorities, you can't win because we are more fractured than we've ever been.
Correct. Because we've kept trying to please too many minorities.
It's going to be this, and it's going to be that, then it's going to be them, and then will show me my representation in the parliament. Yeah, that would be your local member.
And I'll give you an example. Let's take any minority you want to think of that's migrated to Australia. And you say, well, 3% of the population. I think let's use 4%. I think 4% is Chinese born or background now, right? So you turn around and say, well, they're a minority. You go, okay, do we have to run every policy to ensure that those people are happy with everything because they're a minority and we want to do things the Chinese way to make them feel comfortable since they've just come here?
Or do we take 4% of 150 and say, where's 6 people that we need to put into parliament to represent the China?
That's right. And then the question becomes, well, why do you need to represent the Chinese community? Now, what I mean by this is, to me, if you've chosen to come here, because we're not talking students, temporary residents, we're talking PR or citizenship. Now, you've chosen that. We didn't go to China with a gunboat and load up the Chinese and bring you back here. You've chosen. So why did you choose to come here? Because it's a great place, better life for your family, freedoms, free speech, private property rights, rule of law. It's a good life, which means you've chosen to come here, which means we don't need to cater to your Chinese nature as a minority. We need to cater to you as an Australian.
That's right.
Just like me. And ensure that if we turn around, we find businesses are saying, oh, we've got a policy. We don't hire Chinese accountants. Then as a government, we step in and we say, that's discrimination under the Racial Discrimination Act. You hire people, irrelevant. You don't carve out a piece of Australia that becomes little China, and then you don't carve out policy to serve their needs. The onus is on them as people that chose to move here to take the opportunities that we afford them, and the onus is on us as saying, well, we have this migration, so the onus is on us to welcome them too and not make them feel uncomfortable and help them get comfortable into Australia.
Yeah, life. And I think largely, a lot of migrants into Australia have done that, right? So I actually think
majority. I think it's been like, well, probably 99%. It's only recently that we've had some of the issues.
But so my issue, Dave, is that I actually think the political class feel like that they need to have this debate about representation and making sure that everyone's represented. But realistically, like, a lot of Chinese people wouldn't give two flying Fs if there wasn't a Chinese parliamentarian, as long as in the community that they live, there are services there, their kids are going to schools.
Garbage gets collected, they got good schooling.
Free speech, they can get jobs, they get paid, no one's going to come and take their property. You know what I mean? That's
Correct.
what they're here for.
Correct. Because when your parents came here, did we suddenly say we've got an Italian, we've got all these Italian migrants, they've come with the Maltese and the Greeks, they're going to get a driver's license, make sure we print it up in all these different languages. It didn't happen. The responsibility was on your parents to learn English. Now, we were probably a bit too harsh that we didn't have things like we do now where we'll provide TAFE services for language and things I think is a tick. But we didn't turn around and say, no, you come to Australia and what you're really doing is carving out a little piece of Lebanon, a little piece of Italy, a little piece of China. What we're saying is come and be part of the rich tapestry that is the Australian culture, take the opportunity to make a better life for yourself and your family, and therefore we don't need to govern for you as a minority, and we shouldn't even talk about you as the Chinese Australian community, because then the next question becomes, how many generations before you're just Australian?
Yeah, I know.
How many generations does an African American need to be removed from, they don't even know which country in Africa they're from before you just say they're American, and therefore they have American rights, and they have American access and American responsibilities. And that's the mistake we make when we start to lean into this, governing for the minority.
So how do we safeguard the minority? So there's some things we've spoken about, some checks and balances, independent bench, the Senate, some other legislation that makes sure that minorities still get a voice. But an interesting one, Dave, we've spoken about Brexit a number of times. So 52% voted to leave the EU, 48% voted to remain. Technically majority, right? But nearly half the country felt, cut out after the decision. Like, that's a pretty big decision.
It is.
To go 52-48. Like, would you say they had a mandate?
I wouldn't call that a mandate in general day-to-day politics and legislative, making of legislation. In something that you've put forward as a single decision, I'd say it's a mandate, because the whole question was a mandate. Do you give us the mandate to leave the EU? So the question in and of itself was a built-in mandate. So that's why referenda is very different, and that's why you have them, right? Because it's not something you say, oh, we lost 52-48, they're reducing the speed limit to 40 kilometres an hour. This is something that's so huge, that's why you turn around and go, well, it's not up to us to make the legislation. This is so big that even though we have the numbers in the House and in the Senate, we could do it, it's going to echo for eternity and impact everyone, and therefore we think this is one of those things that you get an individual vote on. So I would say, yes, there's a mandate in that regard. But here's something for you, because, and again, maybe I should leave this for a whole episode, but when you say, like, you'd never forgive Nigel Farage for Brexit, right?
So not Brexit. The outcomes that were to be delivered to all of Britain as a result of Brexit, I think were based on a whole lot of false assertions and assumptions that they never occurred. But
a lot of them were blocked, because on both sides of the aisle, Tories and Labor, there are a lot of people that didn't want it. So, and this is one of the things I got to with when I said Keir Starmer, for example. He knows they had Brexit, and he's turning around doing these little sneaky deals to give the French or the EU fishing rights into British waters and different things. That was some of those things were the very reasons why people voted to leave. But he's finding these sneaky ways to do it. So he's not listening to his people. But without going to
52% of them.
But even 52%, here's something when we talk about the EU and Brexit, and this is why it could, I'll try and be short because I think it's a whole episode. But everyone say, oh, why'd you leave the EU? The EU was better for this and it was better for that. And there are obviously things that were better. But if we're going to take that approach and we say we create these large transnational blocks because it streamlines travel, because it reduces trade barriers, it sounds good in theory, but then you've got the unelected bureaucrats in Brussels that do what they want, and then you lose your autonomy to control your own borders, as the UK has, because they're under the human rights laws that are not, they have no say in. Now, if we take this approach that, no, the best way to do it is to be borderless in this giant world, but why doesn't Australia do it and say, hey, New Zealand, hey, Fiji, Samoa, let's all get together, even China, right? Because in theory, that's what you're doing. You're creating these big, large trading blocks. And if we personify it, it's like saying, well, you know what? I get sick of walking all the way up here and across here to go to the bus stop. If we all pull down our fences, I can walk really quickly and you can walk quickly, and we don't have fences, so we can all chip in for one guy to mow because it's easy. He doesn't have to do as many edges, and our kids will all see each other, and we don't do it. And the reason why we don't do it is we know that if we pulled all our fences down and we did all this sort of thing, that the benefits, we'd suddenly forget about them or not want them as soon as one child was raped, as soon as someone's house was broken into. So we create borders to control our own life and our family, and we budget our family, we mow our lawn, we keep our house the way we want it, and that's what the nation state is.
Yeah, I know.
So it's too easy an argument to say, but I could travel the Schengen zone so easily, and I could go and work in France for a year, and I could go and work in Poland for a year. And that sounds great when you're a professional, but when you're a motor mechanic, you can't just uproot your stuff when you're a bricklayer. So this is why I get the arguments on an EU. I understand the value at a macro level for some, but I also understand why losing your sovereignty, losing your culture, and having no say in it because you don't get a vote, that's where there's a problem.
Yeah, but I get it. I do. With the whole Brexit discussion, the fact that they voted 52-48, good on them. But then whatever the Conservatives put up to say that was going to be a benefit of Brexit and an outcome of Brexit that would benefit the British people, they should have delivered on. Post-Brexit, only Conservatives governed in the UK.
That's right, but there are lots of Conservatives that were Remainers.
I know, but the Conservatives had a massive majority in the House of Commons post-Brexit for an extensive period, correct? Yep. Up until they got wiped, and now they're probably going to get back.
That's one of the reasons why they've been wiped. The Conservatives are basically, they're nearly in a death spiral.
I know, but just work with me.
And this is why.
But they had a massive majority, so they should have implemented some of the outcomes to make sure that Brexit was beneficial to the British people. They didn't. They didn't control the borders.
Correct.
Right? Stammer's going to wear his own heat for his lack of implementing controls, but a lot of that potentially some of that he inherited, right? Yep. So they've just been diabolical. And I just get back to, they made assertions and assumptions that our model was going to deliver, and it didn't deliver, right? And that's got nothing to do with democracy. They did the right thing. 52-48, yep, you're gone.
Well, it does. It has things to do with democracy in that this is what I mean. The majority said they voted for Brexit. And then the parliamentarians, because they were in the majority of them within the minority, they governed to how they wanted, right? So this is one of the problems. They govern for the minority.
Yep.
Now, I don't have any issue with Farage, and I think that he's going to be a good thing for the UK. I'll say if and when he gets in, but it's looking more like when. You talk about outcomes, and I actually agree with you. For me, here's one of the things I think Farage needs to be on the table for his prime ministership when it happens.
Go on.
He looks like he's going to have such an overwhelming majority and a mandate. So if you don't deliver on the upside promises that you made for Brexit in your time,
you're gone.
That's right. Because that's the point where the guy that ran on it, the guy that said it'd be better, he now has control. That looks like be control of the upper and lower house when it comes. Now's time to enact all those things so you can show the positive outcomes when your term is up or terms are up.
I like it. No, good discussion, Dave. So I want to just close out on a couple of things. So where have we landed in terms of, I actually think democracy is about participation, right? But then I think the mechanics of government and politics then weighs into it. and spins it into a whole lot of drama for us.
Unfortunately. And I think it was Churchill that said, democracy is the worst system except for all other systems of government. And that's probably a really good summation, right? Which is, yeah, it's flawed. It has a lot of things that we wish we could fix. But at the end of the day, what would you replace it with? Would you really replace it with socialism?
No,
Communism, fascism?
But what I'm saying, like,
no, you wouldn't.
Yeah.
But what I mean is for people listening, particularly the young ones, if you really think socialism, communism, and fascism works, you really need to dive into your history.
I know. So,
which means we're left with this flawed system.
I know, but we keep it like the US is just like it's like a lolly bag of discussion, isn't it? Like you got like
we've got so much
jelly
material,
beans, right? Because even
it just gives us so much room for activities.
Because I note overnight there was another shooting in a Catholic school in, I think, Minneapolis.
Transgender.
Couple of kids gone.
Yeah.
17, two dead, unfortunately. 17 injured. But polling shows, Dave, that a majority of Americans support background checks on guns, right?
They already have them.
Right.
So this is one of the things to discuss in our episode coming up on Chasing Utopia. Here's the thing. Someone that's prepared to shoot up a church and kill anyone that's in there, including kids, if you think they will not go and get a gun on the black market, you're sadly mistaken.
Yeah, I get it.
It's one of the things I have. I'm seeing talking to a lot of people I know on the police force, and the domestic violence thing is no good. But we've got a commissioner that's gone so hard on it that people are fronting courts. Pregnant women are fronting, or I shouldn't say women, it's a woman, and I'll get to the second one. A pregnant woman is fronting a court for domestic violence because she flicked her husband's ear. A woman is fronting court because she threw a shoe at her partner because he was at the pub drinking and forgot to pick up the kids. And these sources are coming directly from the police. They're very disgusted and unhappy about some of this stuff. But we've got someone that's decided zero tolerance. And when you do that, you go, well, if the bloke flicked the ear, you'd be charging him, so they're having to do it with women. We're getting to the point of absurdity. So what I'm getting at with this is that with an AVO, if you think the guy that's going to burn the woman in the car, he's going to blow her head off with a gun. If you think he turns up to her workplace or her home and gets, oh, shit, AVO, I'm going to be in real trouble for this murder. I better wait 6 months until it's up. It's not going to happen. It's the same thing when you see Jacinta Allen in Victoria will ban machetes. Someone's going to take a machete to a fight. They're not going to go, get me a legal weapon.
But I think the issue in the US, Dave, is that people can get AK-47s from the black market, right? Because there is such a profitable black market there because of the volume of guns that are sold, right? If you had
and why is a black market in any item? What makes them valuable?
Scarcity.
But it's more than that. It's regulation, right? People get illicit drugs and they're worth value because we don't turn around and manufacture cocaine, sell it through pharmacies. You can go in there legally and buy it, and you've got to give over your driver's license. Now, I'm not advocating for that. I'm using it as an example. So what happens, the tighter you control guns, the more valuable something becomes on a black market.
Very cool. Can we finish up, Dave, on the US? So it calls itself a democracy. Would you?
Well, actually, it does. Well, it does, but it's not.
Yeah,
it's a constitutional republic.
But structurally, it's moving towards minority rule from the Senate, the Electoral College, lifetime Supreme Court appointments. It allows a shrinking few to make a whole lot of decisions. Your comment?
I disagree.
Go on.
Trump took the popular vote. He took the Electoral College. I think it was 95% of all counties moved to the right in the primary voting. The Supreme Court have struck down things for Trump. They've upheld things for Trump. And it's not been along party lines. I think they were moving to the minority under a Biden administration. And again, this is not me advocating that Trump's fantastic and getting everything correct, but I think we're moving. I think we're seeing sensible return because I'm even starting to see sensible debate from both sides, right? So, for example, I'm very critical of the far left, the progressives, but there are Democrats like Josh Shapiro and Rahm Emanuel that are starting to actually raise their voices and have what I would consider good, healthy, robust political debate without the hyperbole and the carry on and the, because remember, one thing to remember under Trump that I think no one should ever forget that supposedly, hates him. We've been told since 2016 that the Nazis were coming, that he was Hitler, that the brown shirts, that we were going to end up, Whoopi Goldberg got to the point, he said he's going to put y'all back in chains, and she said they're going to break up interracial marriages. At some point, you got to start saying, you know what, as a Democrat, I'm not going to be a Republican. I might be an independent at best, but these nut jobs over here, I'm sick of them. I don't want to hear race baiting anymore. I don't want to hear you telling me he's Hitler. I don't like the guy. I disapprove of his policies, but stop telling me we've got the Fourth Reich happening.
Yeah.
And that's so I think it's moving away from minority rule. I think it's getting more back to rule for the majority. Yep. Because I'd like to think, let's even use the DEI stuff and the woke stuff I hate in unis. To be honest, even universities, it was still a minority that were that way. It's just that the majority were too scared to say anything because they get cancelled and attacked. So as you cut off that cancer that is the woke and the bizarre, what you're doing is you're freeing up everyone else to be themselves. That doesn't mean you freed up 75% of people are Republicans. It means you freed up your other Democrats, your independents. Those are apathetic to politics. And that's where you want to be.
I want to finish up, Dave, because I'm closing in on my 25%. I want a commitment.
I think you're over
when
time.
are you and I going to have a podcast? I want to know, right? I want to know how I, with your help, can assess how effective and successful Donnie has been in his first 12 months in office.
Well, strike one is a secure border. Number one.
Done. No. Just think about it. I want to know. I want to have the discussion because that's a discussion.
Well, what we'll do is we'll go through. You put out what I would suggest is put out the 5 to 10 things that you would consider transcend politics, that are just to do with life, how it impacts the average person that doesn't even vote. Set those things out, and we'll measure what they were in January of this year,
what they are now,
and we'll look at them in 4 years. So that would be things like wars around the world. It'll be the economy. It'll be employment. It'll be border security.
I know because like one of the numbers is going to be the $400 trillion of tariffs that he's bringing in because overseas governments are paying that.
Yeah, well, I did see something that actually the tariffs are bringing in a lot of money, and that doesn't appear to be in dispute.
But who's paying
if I'm going to, well, for the most part, it appears to be that some people have had a free ride or a good ride, or accepting you got to pay a bit more. So that's multinational corporations, that's some governments.
Yeah, but ultimately it's a consumer, isn't it? Because they pass it through.
Well, yes and no. It all depends on how much your margin is and what you can absorb.
That's what I mean. But
well, here's my criticism at this point. The numbers I've seen of what it's bringing in look fantastic, right? So, like, it's billions and billions of dollars. But I'm well aware that he stuck $5 trillion in the big, beautiful bill. So if you turn around and tell me, Tony, tariffs are working, we've brought in $3 trillion, and then you say, and we're expanding our military budget, and we're now spending $5 trillion, well, you're still -2 to me, so I'm still going to criticize you. Because one thing I think the US definitely needs from its leadership now and probably for the next 2-3 decades is getting that national debt under control. Because I think the interest bill is like $1 trillion a year.
Yeah.
And if you think you divide $1 trillion up by 52 and start working out how many new hospitals, schools, upgrading schools, more teachers, more police, you work out what that is, that you're just paying in interest. That's insane.
I know. So, Dave, great chat again. I love being part of a democracy of two in the land of Lodge.
Well, as you'd notice when the company structure was established, that democracy of two made that I had the controlling share.
Yeah, I know. Democracy. So I'm actually the minority.
Dictator Dave.
Great chat, Dave. Talk next week, mate.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for listening to this episode, and we hope you enjoyed it. Like us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Please leave us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.